Here we are, the end of another cycle of videos. Most of you probably don't get what that means, so I should probably take some time to explain it. Every 2 weeks, I upload a video. I do 3 standard review videos, and then do something different. Like last time I did the analysis on Show Yourself, but this time I wanted to do something different. I wanted to return to 3A content and discuss their Afton series, which concluded a little over a year ago. And fun fact, without the series, I would not be here making these videos, or be active in the Minecraft animation community. The full movie just popped up on my feed one day, and as you can guess, I ignored the video and moved on with my life. No, I'm serious. The first time YouTube recommended it for me, I blew it off because the title had the words music video in it, and I am not a musical guy. I mean, seriously, it is bad in my opinion. So, that's basically what I thought it was going to be, a musical. So, I skipped it. But luckily, YouTube never takes no for an answer, as we all know with YouTube Premium. So of course the video kept popping back up on my feed. So after several times of trying and ignoring, I finally decided to watch the movie so YouTube would shut up. And I have to say, I was pleasantly surprised. With how convoluted the FNaF lore is, I did not expect a half-hour long movie to display most of it, and certainly not as accurate as it is. But as I said, I was pleasantly surprised. The 6 parts that make up this full movie each have their own parts of the FNaF lore, with some different and neat touches made by the creators of the series. And so I was thinking, wouldn't it be fun to go back and rank the series that got me into Minecraft animations? So that's why we're here, and I've spent way too long in the intro. But before we do start, I do just want to make this clear, this is my opinion, so please don't attack me in the comments or anything. But if you do disagree with my opinion, let me know what yours is in the comments. And without further ado, let's get into this really long video. Okay, look, I'm sure most people can agree with me on this one. If you've ever seen the series, or even just the standalone video / part, whatever you want to call it, you know this was a bit of a train wreck. But before I rip this thing to shreds, let me get the formalities out of the way. So this was after, part 2, following the first part of the series, which is called Bringing Us Home. And I got nothing else to say, I'll just get back to shredding the video, the fun stuff. So what I feel like was the biggest downfall of this video was the lighting. There were a lot, and I mean a lot of bad choices here. I mean, just look at these examples below. Yeah, you get what I mean now. A lot of the time, parts of the characters will blend into the scenery behind them, or the bad lighting will just cause them to look abnormal compared to everything else in the shot. Another major problem with this animation is the clipping. Yeah, it's also kind of bad here. But what I think is the worst thing here is the way the story is shown. If you don't have a firm understanding of the FNaF lore, it's not going to make much sense to you because it's so hard to follow. Like for example, Charlotte is in this video with no exposition. We saw Henry for a bit in Bringing Us Home, and the same could have been done with Charlotte just so we knew that she existed before this part in the series. But those are just the more noticeable issues. Some of the smaller ones are things like the facial expressions, which never quite feel like they're legit. Luckily, this issue is resolved in later parts of the series. Another smaller problem I have with this animation is the pacing. Look, it's not terrible, but in my opinion, it is just not the best. Things really just felt like they were all over the place. We start off with a slow pace, then Afton kills Charlotte and the pacing speeds up for a few seconds. Things go back to slow, things go back to fast, etc. This may have just been 3A trying to match the pacing with the music, but it just did not work for me. Like, if you're going to change the pacing, do it like how Break the Cycle did it. That animation started off slow and then sped up, but the reason it works is because it kept its pacing. After that slow point, it stayed fast and exciting. But now I'm off topic, let me get back to the video. My last problem that isn't really a nitpick is Afton's bugged out hand. It's just very distracting when you're watching the animation, and then suddenly his hand is having a seizure in the background. Well, I think I've insulted this animation enough, let me go to the positives. In terms of actual animation, like animating characters, this part was probably better than Bringing Us Home. Things felt a little more lively and fluid, but still not to its fullest potential. But as I said earlier with the facial expressions, it gets better with each part of the series. My only actual issue with the movements was with the fight between Henry and Afton. It just looked awkward. But back to the good stuff. Another pro I have for this video is the syncing. There were a lot of great opportunities that were exploited, like when Mango gets tasered, or when the souls possess the animatronics. And with all that said, those are my main points to take away from It's Me. It's very flawed, but its good qualities help make up for it. It's not terrible, but nowhere as good as I think it could have been. Yeah, that's the actual name of one of these parts, since that's the name of the song it's synced with. Very original. Anyways, now, this is part 3 of the series, following It's Me, and marking the halfway point of the saga. Now, this one is similar to It's Me in terms of its flaws, but its improvements place it higher on the list. Like, for example, the pacing is a bit better than it was in It's Me. Like I said a little bit ago, It's Me was having an identity crisis in the pacing department. But here, the crisis has been sorted out, kind of. We start off by seeing Afton's routine in prison, which is where he went after the events of It's Me. How many times can I say It's Me? Oh my gosh. Anyways, and I have to say, I do really like the segment of the prison stuff. This is one of those spots on the FNaF floor that's kind of gray, so the animators had to come up with something to fill in the gap. Now, the theory that Afton escaped jail has been around for a bit, so it's not exactly an original idea, but it's still just a really cool sequence. So after seeing Afton in jail for a bit, we get this cool escape scene. But there's this one problem, and that's, how does he have a bomb in the jail just sitting under the table and nobody found it? 3A tried to fix this plot hole in the full movie version of the series, but it just still isn't very convincing. I'm sure that at some point a guard or somebody would have noticed what Afton was doing, but nope. So after Afton pulls out his plot convenient bomb, he chucks it at a wall, the wall blows up, and he runs, stealing a police car and leaving. And I mean, seriously? Does this prison have no guards positioned outside or anywhere around the perimeter? This has to be one of the lowest security prisons in the area, which is not where Afton should be with his lengthy record of killings. But whatever, the show must go on. So then Afton drives to one of the now abandoned Freddy's establishments, which also doesn't make much sense. I get that the animators were trying to follow the lore of the games, but still. We see Afton thinking of his kid in jail, who's just vibing in Afton's basement. Oh crap, I should have given that context. Crap, they're here! Okay, look, the point I was trying to get across before the FBI came and intruded on my video making was that Afton should be going back home and not to the pizzeria because, well, his house is where the kid is, and that's who he was thinking about in jail, that's why he escaped. So, this is where the pacing gets a bit weird. It's nowhere near as bad as It's Me, but it definitely slows down. With how things were going so far, I was expecting Afton to have a big fight with all the animatronics. But instead we just get a very slow and rather dull fight with Freddy, before Afton breaks down all the other animatronics, which is only implied through transitions. Then Golden Freddy's soul comes out because he got hit with a paint can thing, and then all the other souls from the broken animatronics scare Afton into putting on the Spring Bonnie suit, which kills him. And here's my only lighting issue I have. There are a lot of bright, flashing red lights all over the room, coming from the old arcade machines. And the red lights really clash with the blood coming from the suit as Afton gets spring locked, which is really unfortunate because it's a really cool detail. This could have easily been fixed with a light change for the arcade machines, and I'm really not sure why the adjustment wasn't made. So now that I'm done with this part's story and pacing, let me touch on the other things. The movements are decent here again, with some improvements over the previous parts. The fight between Freddy and Afton felt very fake and slow though, showing that there's still a lot of room for improvement here. The lighting also is mostly good, with the minimal changes needed to be made like I said earlier. Overall, I definitely enjoyed this part more than It's Me. It felt a lot more creative, and was better paced and more enjoyable to watch. Okay, some of you may have been expecting this part to be higher on the list, and I can understand that. There certainly were some great aspects in this video, and it was a solid start to this series. You could probably just swap my number 3 and 4 picks around, and it really wouldn't make that big of a difference, but I ended up going with this part because it was the lesser favorite of mine, at least at the time of me writing the script. And the main reason for my decision was really only one reason. Almost everything in this part felt rushed. Not in terms of animation production, but just the way the pacing was. Nothing really had time to sit, and it was just one thing after another as quickly as possible for the most part. Like for example, when we're only 20 seconds into this animation, Afton is already luring kids into the back room and killing them. His actions don't really seem to have a motive, and a bit more of a prologue could have helped here. We also don't really have an introduction to who Afton and Henry are, so this video, like I said for the other two parts I've already discussed, basically relies on the viewer to already have a good understanding of the FNaF lore. The only portion of the video that wasn't overly paced is when the crying child is having nightmares and sees the nightmare animatronics. And while we're talking about this part of the video, I'll go ahead and compliment the good stuff. I really like the level of detail put into all the nightmare animatronic rigs, which is probably what shines the most here. They aren't exactly like the actual characters, but they're close enough. So throughout the entire nightmare section, we can see how the crying child has grown to fear his father's creations, mainly due to one of them killing his sister Elizabeth earlier in the animation. I like how that one incident in particular is elaborated more on with Nightmare Fredbear, when the crying child looks at his stomach mouth thing. It's really just another cool attention to detail that I really appreciate. Another good thing I want to talk about here are the transitions. There are a lot of good ones in this video, and it's really a shame they don't appear this consistently for the rest of the series. My favorite one was probably when the crying child falls on the ground and then wakes up in his bed. It's nearly perfect. Or at least it was until a certain Seth messed it up, at least according to Isaacs. Isaacs or Isaacs? I also really like the ending of this animation, where the animators added an extra segment at the end of the video that had voice acting. It was a creative touch that sadly didn't continue in the other parts of this series. Now, back to the bad stuff. Now, not all the movements here are bad, but if you compare them to the later videos in the series, there is a noticeable change in quality, which is for the better, throughout each video. The facial expressions also are a bit dull at times here, and could have used a lot more work. But, then again, this was the first part of the series, so I'll cut it a little bit of slack. So overall, not a bad start to the series, but it could have been better. The pacing needed to be slowed way down, and the character animations have a lot of room for improvement, but as I said earlier, it gets better with each part of the series. So, this is part 4 of the Afton series, and it shifts perspectives from Afton to his son, Michael, who has been brought back to life. And for being the first video to focus on Michael, it does a really good job. There are a lot of scenes with him that were really well done, and genuinely made me feel bad for the guy. Since he was gone for so long, coming back only to see the terrible things his father did, it's just really sad to see. I thoroughly enjoyed watching him uncover why Afton did what he did, and seeing him kind of develop as a character, something I didn't really expect to see from the series. It's actually one of the main reasons why I positioned this above Bringing Us Home. So around 2/3 through the animation, there's a gas leak, which causes Michael to hallucinate all of his fears and past obstacles. It's a genuinely unique moment that you wouldn't see in most Minecraft animations, and this is what I consider to be the character development I mentioned earlier. But with that quality aside, let me talk about everything else that's packed into this animation. So you start off seeing Michael come out of the basement, downstairs area after being dead for several years. Yeah, FBI agent, I didn't say basement, are you happy now? Sheesh. Where was I? So anyways, Michael looks around, and then his attention is caught by the TV in the room, which is on for some reason despite nobody being in the house for who knows how long. We can assume Afton was in jail for a decent amount of time, and I'm assuming the older brother got sent to foster care or something like that since we don't see him ever again in the series. The TV then shows Afton's list of crimes, which Michael barely even reacts to. I mean seriously, he just shakes his head like he's slightly disappointed. Then Michael sees an ad for Circus Baby's animatronic rental service, and remembers that's where his sister died. So in what I'm assuming is a quest to get answers for why his father killed over 10 kids, Michael puts on some security guard clothes and heads off. So now we have an overabundance of questions. Did Michael just suddenly become an adult so the series could continue? Or did he age while he was dead or something? He also didn't even apply to work for the rental service, or at least it isn't implied. This is just poor storytelling. So skipping ahead a little bit, Michael discovers some of his father's plans after doing some researching around the rental facility. I'm not really sure why Afton would have them laid out for anyone to find, or why none of the other employees that I'm assuming work there have yet, but whatever. Michael then realizes that his sister Elizabeth possesses Circus Baby, and all of Afton's other victims likely possess other animatronics. Then we get that hallucination scene that I talked about earlier. It's kind of like we see inside Michael's mind, and again, it's just a really cool sequence and I can't shut up about it. After all that, Michael is lured into the scooping room and finds the remains of all the Funtime animatronics. Now, anyone who's played Sister Location knew what was going on here, but as I've said for probably every part of this series so far, it's just poor storytelling. I'm sick of saying that. People who haven't played the games would know that the animatronics were planning on creating an amalgamation of themselves and then using Michael as a flesh suit to escape the facility. For those who haven't played Sister Location and are watching, yes, that's the actual story. Anyways, back to the animation. We get this really cool shot where all the animatronics endoskeleton pieces float into place to create Innard, which is visually impressive and cool to look at. Then Michael gets scooped, worn as a flesh suit, and Innard ejects itself into the sewer, leaving Michael to wonder what the heck just happened. So overall, this part had some really strong stuff going for it. The pacing was much slower than normal, which was definitely for the best, and let moments sit for a second. The story also flowed a bit more naturally than in previous installments, but still had a few issues like I mentioned earlier. There were also several cool scenes and shots, which definitely contributed to the animation's placement. Now we're at the fifth and next to final part of the series. Here's where the animation's quality makes a massive jump. It was pretty good in Daddy's Little Monsters, but I think this is definitely where 3A got a grip on how they should animate things well. All the character movements felt realistic and less linear than normal, and the lighting was most always 5 stars, and the syncing had also improved. I also liked how they included the beginning segment to show the viewer that the other animatronics from previous installments were still out there, which is just good storytelling for once, finally. But anyways, there wasn't as much lip syncing as there was in Daddy's Little Monsters, but there were still some really cool moments with it. Let me show you some examples.
It's me.
You see what I mean. Some of these elements were there in the previous parts of the series, but I just feel like they shine a lot more here. Another good thing I want to bring up here was the Springtrap rig. I really like it mainly because of the eyes and face, which feel a lot more expressive than the other Springtrap rigs I've ever seen. I mean, they're all robots so they can't be that expressive, but you get the point. I also really like the fire effects used towards the end of the video when Michael burns down the attraction. It also really helps that the fire wasn't bugged out like it wasn't going back, but more on that later. And while Springtrap burns in the fire, he does begin to tear away and lose pieces of his suit, which makes the transition from Springtrap to Scraptrap a lot more natural. Heck, this is even done better than it was in the games. But speaking of the fire, I do have one problem with it. We see earlier in the animation that Springtrap traps 2 security guards in different lockers, and I'm assuming they're still stuck in there at the end of the animation, so does Michael just arson them out of existence? Oof, rough way to go. And while I'm talking about my problems with this animation, I should go ahead and just list the ones I have, which are mainly with the Phantoms. All of them are reskins of the original Freddy's group, which, while done in the games, it's just not as acceptable here. In the games, Scott did make a few changes to some of the characters so they weren't complete reskins, like by removing the right leg of Phantom Freddy. Unfortunately, those kind of changes aren't present here, at least not that I saw. This isn't really a huge problem, just a personal nitpick of mine. Another problem with the Phantom animatronics is the absence of Phantom Mangle. Normal Mangle wasn't It's Me, so if 3A reskinned all the other characters, why not them too? But overall, this is a more than epic addition to the series, and I'd probably give it an 8.5 out of 10.
Back, they've been through this before. It's going back, the final page of the lore.
And for our number 1 spot, we have the finale of the Afton series, Going Back. Now I have several reasons for putting this above all the other parts, and no, not just because of the amount of action, but I did really enjoy that. It's mainly because of how perfectly it wrapped up all the narrative this story was trying to tell. It managed to tie up all the loose ends the series had at this point, which is something that even animations as good as Break the Cycle couldn't do. I won't get too much onto that animation since this video isn't about it, but if I ever do rank the Disconnected series, I'll make sure to cover it. So going back, let's talk about why it outshines the rest of the Afton series. First off, we have this sort of recap when Michael salvages all the animatronics. This scene does a good job of reminding the viewer what and who each of the remaining animatronics are, and it actually brings a bit of tension and questions to the table. How will Michael react when he figures out Scrap Baby is his sister, who he had previously failed to set free? How will Lefty react when they see Henry? Will they remember who he is? Or will they have been stuck as an animatronic for too long to even remember? Thankfully, all of these questions are later answered. I also don't have any problems with all these characters just showing up, since as I said earlier, Replay or Nightmare made sure to show what they were still up to. We also see at the start of the animation that Henry is still in the picture, and doesn't seem to have any relations with Michael, implying that his upcoming plan to burn down the pizzeria is his, and Michael doesn't have any knowledge of it. His sudden appearance does feel a bit off though. The last we saw him was in part 2 of the series, and this is part 6, if that gives you a bit of context. Maybe we could have had him show up at the end of Replay or Nightmare to just confirm that he was still a part of the story. When the full movie came out, 3A did add an extra scene at the end of Daddy's Little Monsters to show this, but we're not including any of those bonus scenes, so it doesn't count. So after a day of just standing in the road, Henry goes into the pizzeria to burn it down. And this is our first fire rendering issue. 3A did express that it was very hard to render the amount of fire that they had to for this video, and you could cut them some slack for that, but I have to point it out. There was meant to be fire on Henry's match, but it just looks like an orange aura is floating around it instead. Anyways, back to the story. Henry lights the place on fire while both he and Michael are still inside with all the animatronics, and this leads to some very well-synced and entertaining fight sequences. The first one is with Molten Freddy and Michael, which is pretty well done. The animation is fluid, and as I said, synced very well. Some of the logic in it was a bit off, like Molten Freddy being knocked over by a 5-pound chair, but it's excusable in the moment. It would have made more sense if Molten Freddy's wiring had gotten wrapped up in the chair, which actually would have been pretty cool to see, but it doesn't happen. So then after Michael wins and escapes, we get to see where Henry went. And thankfully, the animators had him find Lefty, which leads to a scene that is probably my second favorite out of this entire animation and the entire series. So as I said earlier, the big question is, will Lefty recognize Henry or not and attack him? And the answer is kind of a mix of both, but mainly leading towards the first option. Lefty recognizes Henry and is apparently overjoyed to see him after 30 years, and runs over to him to presumably embrace him or something, but is going so fast it knocks both itself and Henry into the fire, killing both of them. This does come across as a little dumb in the animation, and left me confused on first watch, as to was Lefty trying to kill Henry, or was just too caught up in a reunion. And as tragic as these two prominent characters dying is, it actually leads to a really heartwarming moment. Henry comes out of the fire as a ghost, and is finally reunited with his daughter, as he remembered her, his daughter. The two hug, and this ties together one of the long, loose ends I talked about earlier. Then, we see what happened to Michael and Scrap Baby. She had become so engulfed in anger and lust for blood that she didn't even recognize him, and slams him into a wall. Now I feel like her fighting Michael would have been more dramatic if Michael had known that the animatronic was his sister from the start, but unfortunately he's just as clueless as her. So after some more unlogical fighting, Scrap Baby is knocked into the fire, and her soul, Elizabeth, is freed. But to Michael, she's just a white apparition. Elizabeth extends her hand to Michael now that she realizes it's him, and he starts to do the same, before remembering the situation he's in. He gets scared and crawls away in a vent, which is kinda tragic to see. I think when Michael saw Elizabeth's ghost, he started to suspect that it was his sister, but was just too scared to see. Then, we finally see where Scrap Trap has been. He's apparently just been chilling in one of the rooms, since he doesn't appear to have a door or vent that he came through. I wish we had seen how he got in there or something like that, but we don't. Just another missed opportunity. So anyways, Scrap Trap hears Michael in the vent and breaks it open, causing him to fall out. Then in what's actually a really unique idea, we see Scrap Trap become Afton, wielding his knife and challenging Michael. Then the entire scenery changes from a blazing pizzeria to a pizzeria that's not burning down, the same one Michael saw Elizabeth die in, as a matter of fact. As the fight goes on, we keep transitioning from what's actually happening to seeing Afton as his old self. Okay, that was a really poor description. Let's just try and describe it better. After Scraptrap tries to attack Michael, Michael pulls out Scraptrap's arm bone and stabs him with it. You know, that's intense. When Scraptrap gets stabbed, we cut away from the fire to the other pizzeria, where Scraptrap is replaced by Afton. This idea is just really cool and very well implemented. Then at the very end, Afton and Michael are in a stalemate, with a piece over the roof falling in on them. Afton realizes he's fighting his son before letting Michael defeat him. And right before the roof hits the two, Afton sheds a single tear, like he's apologizing for everything he's done. He wanted to let his son have a great world, and he ruined that. He caused immense pain to others, and this is just him saying he's sorry, which is something I really did not expect to see from the series. You'd figure Afton would just die a villain with no form of redemption, but not here. It's not much character development if you really think about it, but it's very appreciated. So the two get hit in the head by the piece of the roof, and Michael's soul flies out of his body, and he's reunited with his sister Elizabeth. This again is a really nice loose end that's been tied up by this animation. So Henry and Charlotte come in, and then the four fly away. Now my only complaint with this scene is that we don't see anything happen to Afton's soul. It would have been kind of cool to see it get drugged down or something, but we don't get any nod to anything happening to him really. For all we know, he could still be alive. Plot twist of the century. And with all that said, those are my final thoughts on going back. In my opinion, it's by far the best part of the series, and currently my favorite 3A display animation. It's really great, but not quite perfect, so I'd say it earns a 9.5 out of 10. Well, there you have it, my ranking for the Afton series. Remember, this is just my opinion, feel free to share yours in the comments, I would love to see them. And I'm sorry this video was delayed, it's so massive and I've been so busy, so I just haven't really had that much time to work on it. I'm also 3/5 of the way to 100 subscribers, so if those still watching could subscribe, that'd be very helpful. And before I go, I do want to go ahead and say that my next cycle of videos will be very different. I want to move away from nitpicking and more towards being an actual critic, but the nitpick videos will still be around some. So if you like those, don't worry, they'll still be here. Thanks for watching.